In this video, I'll show you how to do text analysis to generate insights from text data using the R programming language. And we're going to do that by plotting a graph that shows the relationships between words. My name is Tom and I'm a data scientist in Australia. Let's dive straight in. So we're going to use some interesting user reviews data for the Animal Crossing game. I'm going to put a link to this data in the description below so that you can follow along if you want to. And you just need to scroll down the page and then select the user reviews row, copy that, and we'll move over to RStudio. Now, you want to paste that line into this section here down here. Now, I have done a little bit of preparation work so that we can get to the graph as quickly as possible. But I'm going to talk through what I've done so that you can understand how this code fits together. So first of all, in section number 1, we load our packages. So we load the tidyverse packages, which let us work with data. Then we load the tidytext and wider packages, which are two packages that help us to work with text data. And then we load the iGraph and ggraph packages. And those are two packages that let us generate graph plots using R. Now, unless you've already installed these, you will have to install them yourself. And you can do that using this command, install.packages, etc. And I'll put a link to this code in the description below so that you can just copy that as opposed to writing it from scratch. So if you need to, install those packages and then we'll run this chunk. And we can do that by running the whole chunk. You can do that running up here. I'm just using Command-Shift-Return, which is the Mac shortcut to run a chunk. Okay, so we've loaded those packages. Now let's move on to the next section. We're going to load that user reviews data for the Animal Crossing game. And you remember that our ultimate goal is we want to be able to plot that data, like plot words and how they occur together in the user review. So let's load the data. And let's have a quick look at the data and see what we have. So we'll have a look at the data. Here we go. We can see that we have the grade. We have a username. The grade is between 0 to 10, and it represents the score that that person gave to Animal Crossing. There's the username. There's some text, which is the review text, and that's what we're going to be focusing on primarily in this video. And then there's the date. Now, we're not going to use the date because we're not going to do any sort of time series analysis in this video. So let's have a look and see whether usernames appear more than once. And you can see that we've used the sort equals true argument, which that would enable us to see any repetitions of usernames at the top. But in this case, every username is unique, which is fantastic. And if we have a look at our text, we can see that we have some pretty lengthy reviews and, okay, so we also have some repetition. So this is an example where that part of the review is repeated again. Okay, interesting. That's okay. We will deal with that when we come to it. So let's get rid of the date column because we're not going to use the date column and it's nice to keep things as simple as possible. Okay, now I'm going to talk you through this code. The purpose of this code here is to break down the reviews into words. And that's important because we want to build a word relationship graph. So our first step, in fact, I'll break this down before we save it to any variable. I'm just going to comment that out and I'll show you how this works. So let's have a look at the unnest tokens function, which breaks down the text into words. If we run just that section, we can see that we have our original data frame, but instead of having text, every word has been broken out onto its own row. So we have my girlfriend started playing before me, etc. So we still have the grade and the username. Now, the next step is to get rid of stop words. Now, what's a stop word? Let me show you by counting the top words here. So if we count these words that we have as a result of unnesting the tokens, in fact, hang on, wait a second, I want to sort that count. We can see that the most common words are words like the, to, and, are, is, and so on. Now, these are words which are called stop words. They're not actually that interesting or useful in themselves. They don't really communicate very much meaning. So what we do is we get rid of stop words, and I'll show you the stop words table, which is in the tidytext package. And it has words like able, about, above, and so on, which are words that we want to get rid of. So the way we do that is we use anti-join. Now anti-join will get rid of any match any match that's in the stop words table. So if we run that, in fact, I'll show you what the results of the counts are if we use anti-join stop words. So we'll count word and we'll sort equals true, so we get the top words at the top. So now this is much more interesting. We have words like game, island, switch, play, and so on, which are much more meaningful for our text analysis. Okay, so that explains why we're doing anti-join. The next step here, so there are some cases where we have a word that might, because R doesn't quite know how to separate out whether numbers are words or not. So if, let's say let's say the number 10 appears 10 times, or like however many times in different user reviews, we don't want to use that number. We just want to only include words that have at least one alphabetical character. So that's what this line here is doing. It's making sure that we have at least one alphabetical character in each word. And then to avoid double counting words for users, so for example, let's suppose you have one user who mentions the word terrible 50 times, we only want to count that once for that one user. And so we use distinct to remove duplicate rows, which in this case is removing duplicate words. Okay, so we're going to run all of that, and then we're going to save that to a variable called review_words. So let's run that now. So we'll save that to the review words variable. Now, just to remind you of where we are, we've loaded our packages, we've loaded our data. We now have a data set which has a bunch of words for each username, and these are the words that appear in the user reviews. Now the next step is we want to calculate the word counts and the correlations between words in user reviews. So our next step is we want to count the number of times that a word is used by different users. And we do that by counting the word column, and we are going to put the result into users_n, which is a new column. So let's run that code. Now, you will see that a lot of words are only used by one user. So for example, this _1_ word, that's only ever used by one user. And that's not really interesting for our analysis. So we want to get rid of words that are only used by a very few users. So here, we're going to only include words, initially anyway, that are used by at least 100 users. So let's run that and save it to a variable called users_who_mention_word. Okay. Now the next step is to identify the correlations between words across users. Now, first of all, we only focus on the words that we've included as a result of running this code, i.e. words that are used by at least 100 users. And then we use the pairwise correlation function. Now the pairwise correlation function is taken from the wider package. And basically what it does is it calculates how often words are found together in user reviews. I think the default algorithm, if I remember correctly, is the Pearson correlation. And we're going to filter, so after we've generated that, we're going to filter if the correlation is greater than 0.2. And the reason for this is we don't want to include words in our graph where there's a very, very weak correlation between them in reviews. So we're going to run all that, we're going to save that to a variable called word correlations. Now we're going to move on to the code where we're going to build this as we go. So we're going to build a word network plot, which is, I'm assuming, what you were interested in the first place. So let's dive into it. We're going to create a new R chunk. And our first step is we're going to use the graph from data frame function to create a graph. So let's run graph from data frame. Oh, great. Graph from data frame. Okay, now we need to specify, first of all, an edge list. And our edge list, that is going to be the lines in our graph. The edge list will be the correlations between words. So we'll use the word correlations edge list, and then the next thing we have to specify is, I think it's our vertices, and those will be the points. Now vertices, we're going to use the number of users who mention a word. So we're going to set up our graph like that, and then the next step is we're going to pipe all of that to the ggraph function. Now the ggraph function lets us create basically plots a graph, and we need to specify an algorithm to spread out the points. And we're going to use the layout equals FR, which is an abbreviation for an algorithm that I can't pronounce correctly, but this will basically help us nicely spread out our points and lines on the graph. So we'll use gggraph layout equals FR. Then we will add some edges, so we'll use geom edge link, there we go. Now we're going to use, in fact, let's just add that by itself, and then we'll add geom node point, that's our nodes, and then we're going to specify some text for each node as well, so we're going to use geom node text, and then we'll specify label equals name, that is to say the name of the vertex. And let's see, let's run that and see what it looks like. Okay, interesting. So you'll notice here we have some words that appear pretty often by themselves, but we also have some clusters of words that appear pretty frequently together in user reviews. So words like bad, honestly, absolutely, and so on, they tend to appear more often by themselves in user reviews, whereas items, crafting items appears quite often. Let's say previous games appears quite often together. Story progress, player progress, single player, those combinations of words are appearing pretty frequently. Okay, how do we clean up this plot? I think the next step here might be because there's a lot of words in here, where they only are appearing once, and I wonder what would happen if we remove words that are not connected to other words. So we can do that by going up here to our vertices, and we'll just use the semi-join function, to remove any words that are not connected in the word correlations table. So we're going to specify the word column in this table, and then the item 1 column in this table. And basically this is saying only include these vertices which have a word in the word correlations. And let's see how that looks. All right. Okay, this is getting better. So now we have a better sense of how these words are connecting together, and it's a bit cleaner. I still don't quite like how the text is overlapping so much. So let's add an additional argument down here, which is repel equals true, and see how that looks. So that's much better. We now can see that the text is a bit more spread out. Okay, let's see what we can do next. So it'd be nice to understand how often these words are used. In fact, how about we try to use color? We'll use color to do this. We use color equals users in, and that means that the color of the text will represent the number of users. Okay, so now words like game, we can see that they're used very, very frequently in different user reviews. Whereas words like friends and so on are used less commonly. Okay, let's see what we can do next. We might be able to, I know what, let's add to the edge link, we'll add an aesthetic that specifies the alpha metric, so that basically we'll change the transparency based on the strength of the correlation. So in this case, the higher the correlation, the darker the line will be. So let's try that. Okay. Okay, interesting. So we now are starting to understand, I want to just kind of step back a bit. We can now start to understand some themes in the user reviews. Now, what I would like us to do at this point is it would be really helpful to see the difference between positive and negative reviews. Positive and negative reviews. Now, the problem we have is that our current code is a bit messy. It's all kind of spread out. So we're going to create a function that will help us to run different configurations of our graph much more easily. So let's move on to the next section where we're going to create a function that will generate our graph, and it will make it much easier to run different graphs. So let's create a new R chunk down here. Okay, so we're going to create a new function. Let's call it generate word graph, for lack of a better name. We'll call it generate word graph, and we're going to just create a draft function. We're going to copy and paste this code into that function. Just a side note, it's really helpful when you're building a function. It's really helpful to build out your initial kind of messy code first, and then afterwards you can turn it into a function, and you can sort of abstract out some of the complexity and details. Okay, so when we're down here, we're going to generate a word graph. We're going to copy this code in. Okay, so now we need to copy this code as well into our function. So we're going to go back down. We're going to add that to our function. So let's see, let's add some documentation. So I have a function to generate a word graph, and let's see, we're going to add, in fact I'll just tabulate that so it's a bit nicer to read. Okay, so this needs to take review words. Just to remind you of where we are, so review words is basically this table. So our function is going to take that as an argument. It's also going to take, now, it's not a good idea to hard code values like this because they're kind of just a bit arbitrary. But what we're going to do is we're going to turn those into function arguments, and we're going to specify some defaults. So we're going to have, up here, we're going to have users n, and we're going to use a default is 100. And we can, again, just use that down here, and then correlation. In fact, let's give it a better name. So we'll call it like minimum users n is that, and then correlation, minimum correlation, we'll call it minimum correlation just so we're a bit clear about what we're doing. Minimum correlation is 0.2, and we'll bring that down here as well. So you can see what we're doing. We're kind of abstracting out some of the complexity and detail. And then this will generate the graph. Okay, so let's run that code to save our function, and then we're gonna rerun our code again, just generating the same graph as before. So we're gonna use, let's see, we're gonna use our review words from before, and we're gonna pipe that into generate word graph. We're gonna use the same minimum number of users equals 100, and we're gonna use the same minimum correlation equals 0.2. So let's generate that graph and see how it looks. Okay, so that is looking good. Okay, so the next step here, now we want to take this function and let's kind of like try playing around with it a little bit and see how it looks. So what would happen if we changed minimum correlation to 0.3? Let's see how that graph would look. Okay, so that, in that case, yeah, we have much less on the graph. Let's add another one. How about we try, in fact, we're just going to try, let's say 50 users and see how that one looks. Okay, so now that's probably a good amount of detail depending on the font size you want to use. What this is showing us is it's showing us a bit more details about themes. So we can see themes like quality of life, grab, waste money. Apparently they think that people are trying to grab, wasting money in this case. See some stuff about primary and secondary. I'm not 100% sure what that would mean. Graphics and gameplay is mentioned, and so on. All right, so our next step is going to be, well, now we've got this useful function to plot a word graph, we're going to move down to the final section, and we're going to look at positive reviews and negative reviews and see if we can identify any themes. So let's go down to our final section. We'll create, in fact, I'll just save the script. we'll add one more, let's see. We need to do one more thing, which is we need to split our data into positive and negative reviews. So if we, let's see, if we generate a count of grade, well, in fact, actually that won't work because we're counting, because, okay, we need to count with the original array. Let me just scroll up again and we'll just look at the user reviews. Sorry about that. Let's scroll down and we'll just count grade inside this one. Okay, so, and then 10 is below, okay. I reckon let's select anything that is, okay, let's select anything below 7 as a bad review. Okay, so let's say, okay, I'm going to comment that out. Let's say we'll take our review words and we'll say negative review, and negative review is any case where the grade is less than or equal, let's say less than 7, and review words positive will be where it's greater than or equal to 7. There we go, and we'll run that code. Fantastic. Okay, so now we're going to generate some graphs for each of these. So let's start out with negative, and let's use this code. We'll borrow this code from above. Generate a word graph. Minimum users equals 50. Now remember that we have, because we're split out negative and positive reviews, there will actually be less users than the total in each of them, because each of them will have fewer users. So we may have to adjust these numbers, but let's try running that and see how our graph looks. Okay, so we can see some themes in negative reviews. Islands, multiple people. Okay, so there might be a theme about multiple islands or multiple people buying something potentially. People think it's kind of like a grab money thing. Super excited. We'd have to look into this, but that could mean that people were initially really excited, but it turned out that the things weren't so good. In fact, maybe this is too. Maybe 7 is too high. Maybe that actually includes some quite positive reviews. How about we change it so it's less than 5, and then positive would be greater than or equal to 5. Let's try that and see how that goes instead. Okay. Now let's bring our minimum number of users down to 40 and just see if we can adjust our graph a bit to get a bit more of a sense of what's going on. Okay. So online friends seems to be a bit of a theme in negative reviews. Maybe there's some issues with online friends. Switching island, okay. There's bugs, it's fish, maybe. Something to do with the progress of a story. Okay. Click spoilers, view, review. There might be issues with how spoilers are handled and so on. Basically, this would just be a way we'd start to look at the data, and we'd have to look into it in more detail, and you can look into it after this video. Let's have a look at positive reviews. What do we find in positive reviews? Let's run the same code for positive reviews. Okay, so here it's a bit too tightly connected. I'm going to increase the minimum correlation we need to 0.25 and just see how that looks instead. Okay, so now things are a bit more separate. I'm going to bring our minimum users down to 30 just to kind of adjust things a bit. Okay, so live quality, recommend highly, Nook models, Nook miles, recommend highly, okay. Local multiplayer. Okay, people are mentioning that there's lots of negative reviews. That's interesting. So maybe review bombing. So maybe there's some people who are posting a lot of negative reviews for some reason. But people are enjoying, I think people are again mentioning kind of like phishing bugs. Interesting. Or yeah, something to do with bugs. And we can expand multiple islands, visiting friends, customization, crafting, etc. So these are some of the positive themes. Okay, so just to recap where we've come from. So we've Basically loaded a whole bunch of text data, user reviews for the Animal Crossing game. We have generated some plots that show the relationship between words, and then we've created a function that lets us easily build word graphs to understand how words are correlated in user reviews. And we've looked at positive and negative reviews. Now, I highly recommend that you look into this yourself, that you find some interesting insights in this data, because with this sort of functions, it's really, really fascinating. So if you found this interesting, if you found this insightful, if you found this helpful in some way, please consider subscribing. And don't forget to give the video a thumbs up, and let me know in the comments below what videos you'd like to see in the future. Thank you and take care.